Now this does kind of look like the intro of a horror film, but it isn't quite that. I wanted to look at some of my underrated players. I also wanted to play with some lighting. It's different, filming at different types of the day, you know what I mean? We're getting creative with the channel. We're going to be doing some different things here and there, and this is one of them. Now, I have used the term underrated like it's going out of fashion over the last year of covering the ELF like fully. I'm going to be doing this kind of format a little bit over the next couple of weeks. We have ELF Live done this week, going to be on Thursday as well. Had the power rankings done. All those will be linked in the description as per usual. All these players that I've picked on defense today, and I will be doing an offensive installation as well. All of these guys are awesome, and there are a ton of other guys that just because they're not on this list doesn't mean they're not going to be on the next one. There's going to be a lot of installments, especially during the off season, especially with a little bit more tape watched. And we're doing like a players one. I think that could be quite interesting, and like asking 100 players who they think's underrated, and then like sifting through that and seeing if we can find some like people I haven't talked about. I think that could be really interesting. Ton of opportunities to do things with that. Anyway. This has been hopefully kind of Brett Coleman-esque in its delivery. That's what I'm going for, of course. I watched a ton of him. And if he ever finds himself watching one of these videos, I appreciate it. I don't think he ever will, but maybe one day it will be pretty cool. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy. These are 5 defensive players I think underrated. Starting with... Taylor is one of my favourite new additions into the ELF in 2024. He can play at corner and at slot, which I think is an underappreciated value in itself because corner and slot are so different, but he has mastered both of those because of his elite level experience with the Philadelphia Stars. His playstyle is hyper aggressive and he stays in the pocket of the receiver throughout the duration of the play. His hips are fluid enough to go with the cuts and turns of the receiver's route. When talking with some of his contemporaries, with people that he's played against throughout the entirety of the season at quarterback, receiver, some of his own teammates, all of them say the same thing, that he is unanimously a top 1 to 3 cornerback in the entire league and is one of the most underappreciated players in the entire league. A big defining factor of Taylor's game is that he can man up with the best receivers in the league. He can also sit in zones. We've seen it plenty of times where he can sit in these shallow zones, force quarterbacks to go through their reads, and eventually, with the Raiders' defensive line, they can get the sacks. And that's the main difference. A lot of players in Europe, or even some of the Americans that come over, are zone specialists or man specialists. Taylor can do both to a very high level. As I said, he can come into the slot, he can cover tight ends because he's physically able enough, he can cover running backs because he's fast enough and athletic enough to match them on their routes and speed. He's even been known to come off the edge as a blitzer because he's a good tackler and, like I said, is physically strong enough to bring down tackles or take on tight ends or even offensive linemen in some cases. His explosiveness as an athlete has also come down to his high point, also his punt and kick return duties for the Raiders, and overall he's just one of the best athletes that have come into the league this year. And I think the second game against the Stuttgart Surge really accurately shows this. This was the game where the Raiders had the surprise win. It was a shootout. Go and watch it if you haven't, but amazing game. And the odd thing about it was Taylor was pretty much manned up on Geyer, who was an elite European receiver, but not Del Stewart, their American receiver on that offense. And that was quite odd, but he locked Geyer up. They had to force the ball to Stewart because Devin Taylor is literally shutting off half the field, and it had a tremendous impact on the game as it went on. In fact, one play in the entire game was towards him when it wasn't a flag. Every other play they tried to test Devin Taylor, try and get a bit of chunk play, or try and get the ball to Geyer, was either when he wasn't on him, or there was a flag on the play so that the result didn't matter. And even then, he intercepted the ball. And now we're going to move on to... Interior defensive linemen are going to be underrated. That's just part of football, but it's going to happen more when you're the only American in the position in the ELF. Now, I've been on record, and I think that Loewer is an all ELF interior lineman. His combination of speed and power in his hands allow him to have a deep bag of setups against offensive linemen. The swim and spin are regularly used with precise time and execution, and the quickness of the line allows him to get early inside pressure and further set up these rush moves in both the run and the pass. He is second in the league for tackles for loss. He does have over 7 sacks from the interior defensive line, and he is undersized. He is only about 6 foot and 290 according to his profile, but even before he came into the season, I thought he was underrated. I watched him in Helsinki, and I knew that he was one of the best pass rushers. His swim move and his spin move, as I mentioned, are lethal. There are very, very few players that can deal with it. And although he has a shorter punch separation when he's engaging with these offensive linemen, he has the strength and power just simply to move people. He is a very good explosive athlete. We've seen him do that by physically removing anchors out of the way and getting into the lanes of the quarterbacks. Now, he isn't just a guy that can affect the pass rush from the inside. He is a phenomenal run defender as well. That strength comes into it, that aggression comes into it, so it's the explosiveness. He's a good tackler. I mean, we've seen him suplex running backs. That is not something that very many people can do, especially after hitting some nasty pass rush moves. And finding an elite defensive lineman that can affect both the run and pass on the inside is just such a rare trait to find, and I think that this has propelled him to all-star status in his first season in the ELF. Staying on the defensive line, we've got now, if you're vaguely familiar with the island nations in the south, like Fiji, Samoa, and the Maori people in general, you'll understand how crazy the athletes are in that area of the world. And I know it says Zaire was a defensive lineman, but that's not entirely true because he will play a lot more outside linebacker. I think he will play more on the line next year because he has shown to be adding to his development as a pass rusher. But as an explosive athlete, he's 275 pounds and he is playing at outside linebacker a lot. Like, it's not like he's listed outside linebacker as more of a predominant pass rusher. He will drop into coverage. The key component to his play is this short burst explosiveness. He has the ability to go from 1 yard out to 5 yards out in a split of a second. I think we'll see a transition to more on the line play. As I mentioned, his sack numbers aren't crazy because he's playing so much outside linebacker, where I think he would be best used on the defensive line, where he could use that explosiveness to hurry the quarterback, get these sacks when they're near him, which he's shown that ability to do, and of course, he is a great tackler. His natural length and size also means he can play anywhere across the defensive line as well as in the linebacker core, giving him more flexibility and versatility within the defensive scheme. And his explosiveness translates from his pass rush package as well as in his run stopping ability. Zaire, I think, has gone massively under the radar because he is on the Hamburg Sea Devils that had a bad year, but he is definitely a bright spark. I liked him when he was in Prague, I liked him when he was in Hamburg, and I want to see more of him in the ELF. Moving back to defensive back, we've got I think a lot of people recognize Tony Anderson as one of the better players in the league, but not many have taken time just to examine how good he is and why he is so good at the Rhine Fire, why he was so good at the Galaxy, and why he was so good in Tyrrell. For starters, the first thing I always do when I look at a player is their measurables. Now, Tony is fucking huge for the position he plays. He's a defensive back, but he's played corner, he's played safety. Primarily this year, he's played nickel, which is rather interesting, but he is 6'4" and about 210 pounds. So for the position, he's an absolute bully. And his natural size is the crux of his game. He's super long, so it's hard for the receivers to get past him on a line of scrimmage. If they do get separation, again, his length plays into his ball playing ability. He has great run fits because he is so big and he can affect it like a linebacker. He's hyper aggressive on his hands, on his tackling, on his position, on his cuts. He is ultra aggressive in trying to get through the receiver to the ball, or even on special teams on blocking kicks. And even because he is such a great athlete, has lined up as a receiver for the Rhine Fire offense when they were going through a crisis at the receiver position at the start of the year with injuries. And it didn't take long. He's a very known player in this league. He's a kind of a player's player where players really do respect Tony Anderson. Everyone who I've talked about in this video beforehand has been like, oh yeah, Tony's a really good player, you should talk about him. And teams just, they don't look at him. Like, he only had 2 interceptions this year. They don't look at him at all, like, throughout the entirety of the play. And it's due to this ball catching skills, this aggressiveness at the catch point, and that length that he doesn't need to jump. He's a good athlete, he can jump pretty well, but he's just so hard to pass around or pass through as a defender. There are a lot of instances where he's being checked at the line, so you can see the quarterback identify where Tony is because he's either in safety, he's in outside corner, he's in slot. Wherever he is, he's quite dangerous, and he is one of the elite European corners. I mean, he ended the French hopes. He's incredibly clutch, actually, in a lot of his plays against Frankfurt, against Paris. Both of those interceptions ultimately led to the win. The block against Madrid really just swung the game completely out of the question. Like, he's an incredibly clutch player, kind of just an all-round player that is extremely valuable for this Rhine Fire team. Concluding the player list is Finishing up with Timothy Sherman, and he's in slightly a different category to some of these other players because he's younger, he isn't as established as some of these, but I really believe that he is one of the next great up-and-coming defensive ends in the ELF. His game MO all starts with the run. He's big, he's strong, he's young, he's athletic, he has a really good ball rush, and he can move much bigger offensive linemen onto their heels and force them into the way they're running back. Now, he's a young defensive lineman who doesn't lack experience. He's played with the NFL Academy. He's been with the Schwabish Hall Unicorns. He's surrounded by a bunch of Swiss talent on that defense that is really high level and has been at different places in Europe throughout their entire careers. So he has a ton of players to learn from within this positional group. I think he's actually extremely flexible on the defensive line as well because he's a bulky defensive lineman. He can pretty much play anywhere you need him to along that front end. As such an effective run stopper and such a physical presence, he can do that at a high level wherever you put him. I also think he's a lot more mobile than people give him credit for. He can make an impact on special teams, which is not something a lot of defensive linemen can do. He can get after the quarterback in these tight angles, especially mobile guys in that conference. There's a ton of them, and he's been able to deal with that with a good amount of hurries and pressures throughout the year. He does need to refine some of his pass rush moves as he is mostly reliant on the ball rush at the moment. In terms of just getting outside this umbrella of underrated players and getting into the all-star conversation that I believe he can do, especially as a homegrown player on the Helvetic Mercenaries. And that is everything. You've probably noticed a few jumps to day and night. Well, that's the magic of camera work and the magic of having nighttime and advantages and stuff like that, and having a late night burst of creativity, I suppose. And even though it does look like I'm filming a horror film, I still haven't got over that. It's been a really enjoyable one. I've loved this process. I think I'll be doing a ton of this in the future. Especially, like I said in the intro, especially with the off-season coming up. Playoffs are in full swing by now, coming up to the first round. All my socials, everything you need to do to message me if you want to suggest some players, do it in the comment section, do it on Instagram, do it on Twitter. I'm active on all of them. So yeah, it's been good. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned some new plays, because I've seen a lot when I make an evaluation on a player. Some people start to talk about him a little bit more, which I think is really cool. I really want these videos, like my evaluations and my delivery, to be really sought after, or anticipated. That's probably the right one. I want it to be anticipated. I want people to be like, looking forward to the next Matt Bressington video, or I wonder who Matt Bressington's going to deliver a video on next. That's what I want. We got a lot of work to get there, but I think it could be fun. And like I said, I wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff if it wasn't for you guys. Nearly a monetization on the channel, so I'll be able to make a couple of pounds from it every now and then. Who knows? Might be pretty fun. And yeah, I think that's it. No public service announcements. Kind of made all that clear at the start about what I'm doing, what my plans are. All good. Much appreciated. I'll see you next time. Thank you very much. See you later. Stay safe. See you later. Goodbye.